It's hard to tell fake from real, and a handful of companies have power that none of us could have imagined even 10 years ago.
Feel we were really on a very good path until something around 2010, 11, 12, where things changed. And I think there's a very significant change. And like you say, there's a few companies that misuse their power, that they took something that wasn't theirs. They took data that was being collected on people. And whatever service you're providing, there will be data in your system. And the question is, how do you deal with that data? Do you actually treat that as something sacred that you should keep? Now, for me, it's always been about the users first. And the concept of collecting data has been so foreign to me that I didn't really think that that would be an option. So the first thing for us as a company is, okay, if this is wrong, let's start by not being part of it. Let's not collect data ourselves. People trust us in choosing the right partners. And I think that's what it is about. When we are choosing a partner, when we go with Neeva, it's because we believe it's a good choice for our users. Personally, I believe the choice that you are offering is a really positive one. And I think it's really good to do what you're doing. We need new ways of providing the choices that people want to see. And I think this is a brilliant way of doing it.
Partnerships matter a lot. We are very careful about who we partner with. Actually finding services whose values are compatible with ours turns out is a pretty big challenge. And, that's one of the big reasons why, we're excited about Vivaldi, because there is a true meeting of the minds when it comes to simplicity.
Basically, in the space of a few years, we've seen so much damage and it needs to be rectified. And I saw an interview with you, Sridhar, where you talked about those things. And I agree with you. I think a lot of the people that have been doing this work, they didn't realize the damage they were doing. I think that time has gone. I think we're seeing more and more people stepping up and saying, hey, enough is enough. We need to change this. This needs to stop.
As you know, tracking came about in a series of small steps without people understanding what they were really getting into. Just definitionally, I think of tracking as like surreptitious observation. People observing things that you are doing without you honestly knowing about it or giving consent to it. And the third-party cookie, as you know, which was a technicality for doing things like supporting logins, became this massive industry where information at the end actually started getting funneled back into Google and Facebook and Amazon. People will be surprised to know that these companies probably collect more data than most governments in terms of how much data is flowing back into them. On the other hand, do 2,000 other companies need to know that you went to a certain page on New York Times or CNN? Or any other site that there is? Absolutely not. We also structured, like Neeva, the product, as collect minimal amounts of data. Many of the companies that started in the last 20 years essentially had this viewpoint that all data was good, and the more they collected, the more option value they would have. Instead, we think about this as what is the barest minimum data that we need to have on the user to create a great experience for the user. And how do we make sure that they feel and they are in charge of their experience? So in many ways, it's a simplified privacy model. It's like what you expect if you're talking to a friend. If you want it to be a confidential conversation, you make that clear to the person. Hey, I don't want you to say this to anyone.
If you are visiting a site, and I agree with you, if you're visiting a site, if you're buying something, you don't mind that they have information. Okay, you bought this at this site, as long as they don't share it with anyone else. We'd actually like them to know that, because if you want to deliver it back, or there's a lot of things like this which actually make sense. It's a one-to-one kind of relationship. And as long as the data is not used for anything else, that's probably okay. We need new ways of providing the choices that people want to see. And I think this is a brilliant way of doing it. One of the things that we do and that I do is to speak up about this and say, hey, we have a problem here. We talk to the EU, we've talked to the American government. I mean, we will tell anyone that wants to listen that we have a problem that needs to be regulated. And I think that's really important. Now, in the meantime, that's taken a bit longer than I had hoped for. Is it really possible that something as abstract as an algorithm can change the way I think? How can that be? I mean, I think for a lot of people, that just seems weird. can a machine decide what I think? No, I'm not that stupid. And a lot of people think that way. So it takes time for people to understand the power of these algorithms and how they work. And it takes time for them to realize that you can't really fix it by doing little things. You actually have to basically regulate the use of data. You need to put the genie back in the bottle.
Again, there's a lot of pressure to remove tracking, but we need to make sure that there is accompanying regulation. Because if we simply put pressure just at the browser level, everything will move server side, but none of us have any insight about anything that happens. So I think there's a big rethink that is coming here, but I do think that we need to approach it from multiple levels to make sure that it simply doesn't disappear from where we are looking into some place that is much harder to actually fix. For example, Google makes more than $50 billion of revenue in search just in the United States. There's only 300 million people in the country. That's $150 worth of advertising per living person in the country. Who do you think is paying for it? It's the consumers.
I mean, I remember the early days where the point was if you had certain information on your customers, you wouldn't share it with someone else.
That's right.
To me, where it went totally wrong is that where companies just decided, hey, we don't have to follow that rule. Just because Google or Facebook or others have underlying agreements with multiple companies doesn't mean that the data that you as a customer have with that company is something that they should have access. Now, there are certain things that you can do. You have relationship with your users. You can use the data based on that relationship. You can't use it for anything else. So the fact that you have certain data that is helping you provide a better service to your users doesn't mean that you own that data or can use it for other purposes. I think there's a significant problem there, and I think we need choice, we need quality, and we need companies that actually consider their users to be customers and someone that you actually treat as your friend.